Over 200 wildfires are currently burning in British Columbia, and that has prompted the province to declare the first state of emergency since 2003. So far, though, no major communities have been overtaken by any fires, but over the weekend, one fire began to threaten the 2,000-person community of 100 Mile House, and they were forced to evacuate, bringing the total number of displaced British Columbians to just shy of 10,000 people, and around 100 homes have been destroyed. Wildfires, of course, are still top of mind for many Western Canadians after the devastating Fort McMurray wildfire that devastated that city and the heart of Canada's oil and gas industry. So it should come as no surprise that Albertans were some of the first people to organize relief efforts and get supplies and money over to British Columbia. And we thank our generous neighbors for that support, of course. But when disaster strikes, much of the spotlight is not only on the grassroots support and relief efforts from our friends and neighbors, but also on our politicians, as it is truly up to them and government to coordinate efforts to prevent these fires from threatening properties and people's lives. And given the current unique political situation in BC, with Premier John Horgan being Premier Designate right now, waiting to be sworn in with his new government on July 18th, it was quite the contrast of reactions by John Horgan and current outgoing Premier Christy Clark. Similar to the slow response by Premier Notley and her NDP government in Alberta to the Fort Mac fire, John Horgan and his BC NDP team appeared to be asleep at the wheel on Friday as the fires really began to rage out of control. But Horgan, because he is a democratic socialist and is big on identity politics and is from Victoria, he had planned to attend the Victoria Pride Parade on Sunday, and he only cancelled his appearance at the last minute after there was some outcry and pressure for John Horgan to lead for once and address this wildfire problem. And it's only fair if he wants to be premier, right? But maybe we should cut him some slack. I mean, after all, the NDP aren't used to being in power. It was for 16 years that all they did was criticize and complain about the efforts of the BC Liberals, so it must have been a little bit strange for Horgan to feel pressure to lead, not complain. Meanwhile, Premier Christy Clark was just doing her job all weekend long. Clark met with evacuees and her cabinet coordinated relief efforts with the federal government. It would have been pretty easy for a premier who had just resigned only a week before to let government staffers and outgoing cabinet ministers take the lead and deal with these fires alone. But Christy Clark knows that even in her waning days as premier, British Columbians needed their government and leaders to step up during this state of emergency and this crisis. And that is exactly what Christy Clark did. Of course, reading between the lines, I think it's pretty safe to say that this also could be an indication that Christy Clark isn't going anywhere and will be staying on as opposition leader once the NDP are sworn in. And I'll say, it looked good on her being out there in the interior of the province meeting with people all weekend long, while John Horgan dragged his feet and then could only announce that he would visit those affected after he cancelled his Pride Parade plans on Saturday. As you know, the current situation in the BC legislature is a minority situation, as no party controls the majority of the seats. So this wildfire situation actually presents an opportunity for all three parties to come together and work to find a solution. As I mentioned, there are hundreds of fires burning, thousands of hectares of forests in BC right now. So both the outgoing BC Liberal government and the incoming NDP government should be scrambling to tender contracts to bring in some of those Martin Mars water bombers, similar to those contracts Rachel Notley infamously cut ahead of the wildfire season that resulted in the Fort Mac fire last year. Maybe Christy Clark needs to hold John Horgan's hand for the next 8 days to make sure the NDP ineptitude we saw in Alberta doesn't repeat itself in BC. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. You know, the last week or so made me really ashamed to be a Canadian when Justin Trudeau made that secret payment to a convicted terrorist, Omar Khadr. And we're not just going to take that lying down. We want to raise money for the victims of Omar Khadr. And that would be the children of Christopher Speer, who he killed with a grenade in Afghanistan. Go to spearkids.com and chip in some money. I've chipped in $100 and I hope you will do the same. Help us right this wrong.